Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for Fantasy Premier League content for the 2022-23 season. My name is Dan and we are back with the Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid series for the 2022-23 season. Guys, if you haven't watched these videos before, they're basically videos where we look at some transfer trends and try and jump on the right ones and try and get away from those bad transfer trends and just make the best transfers we possibly can, because, you know, that's basically what FPL is all about, really. It is game week 1, so this video is going to be a little bit different from usual, but this concept very much still applies. So if you're hyped about Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid for the new series, please do leave a like. Please do subscribe if you're new around here as well. We're seeing how many subscribers we can get before the game week 1 deadline. And without further ado, guys, let's get on and see what the rules of this video are. So buys are players you probably don't have but should consider bringing in. Sells are players you probably have but should consider removing. Keeps are players that you might be thinking about removing, but I think you should actually keep them. And avoids are players who are pretty hyped up right now. A lot of people are talking about these players as potential options, but I actually think they're potential traps that we could potentially avoid. Just don't go for these players, basically. So there are going to be some players in here that you disagree with. That's very much part of this series. It's about creating discussion and trying to get on the right trends and the wrong trends. And yeah, you may not agree with everything, but this is just very much my opinion on some of the most popular players in FPL right now. So let's start off with a buy, and I have gone for Saka for a buy. I don't think too many people own Saka right now, but I think his ownership should be a little bit higher than it actually is. He's a player that is obviously playing for an Arsenal team which has great fixtures. You know, after Crystal Palace away, which I don't think is the best fixture in the world, I really like this Leicester, Bournemouth and Fulham game all in a row. And yes, you could say, oh, maybe I'll buy Saka next week, but why not just save your transfers and get him in now? Crystal Palace is not the worst game in the world, and I think there could be a lot of goals for Arsenal over the games following that. Arsenal have had a great pre-season. We think Saka is going to be on penalties in the new season as well, which is really nice. And he did really well last year, 11 goals and 9 assists. So a really strong player, a really nailed on player, and a player with very good fixtures playing for a team that shows a lot of promise right now. And I promise I'm not saying that with bias. Usually I just completely avoid Arsenal players because I'm quite a negative Arsenal fan, but I'm actually feeling like there is some positivity to be taken from some of these Arsenal players. And of the 8 million midfielders, I think Saka is probably my favourite choice. You can see some other stats on screen right now as well, guys. These stats on screen are actually been provided by Fantasy Football Hub. So if you want to have a look at Fantasy Football Hub's Opta Stats tool, where you can look at all of the Opta stats from all of the players that I use in these videos, you can go check out the link in the description. Our next buy is Robertson, another player who is kind of low ownership that I think should be slightly higher. Robertson obviously had a phenomenal season last year, but I don't think people quite understand how good his second half of the season was. He actually was third for points per game in the second half of last season. The only players who were beating him were De Bruyne and Son, which is quite crazy when you think about it like that, that Robertson was competing with the likes of these super premium players in terms of points. So he was absolutely on fire, even though he didn't play every single game. We expect at the beginning of this season, before Champions League in particular, Robertson is going to play every single game. In terms of Liverpool players, you can't get much more nailed on than a Robertson, which is really good. He's getting in those really dangerous positions, particularly when Luis Diaz is playing. It's actually forcing Robertson to come actually quite nicely inside, and they're kind of rotating in those positions in and around the box. So at many times, Robertson is actually playing in a left wing style position when Liverpool are in attack. So that's going to give us lots of opportunities for goals and assists. Just being in the right area is half the battle a lot of the time when it comes to racking up those points. So definitely Robertson. In terms of defenders, a lot of people are going for some other premium defenders. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, very popular. But I do feel like Robertson could be a real gem that if you have him, you can really set yourself apart from many other FPL players who aren't going for Robertson. Okay, time for some sells, and I know a lot of you guys will have Reece James in your team. Probably at least half of you guys watching this video will have Reece James. This is the point of this video, guys. I'm telling people to sell players who are already highly owned, and I know that's going to be a little bit controversial because, you know, you guys already have James. You're already thinking, oh, I like James, I don't want to sell him. But I do have a few concerns about Reece James, and I want to just outline them here in this video, really. And I just thought it's just be the best opportunity to go through it so people understand why I'm personally not considering considering Reece James in my Game Week 1 team. Now, first of all, I don't really like where Chelsea are at the moment. I think there's been some comments made by the kind of Chelsea camp, I guess, that it just doesn't seem like they're quite ready, quite right in the right place. They're still looking to sign a couple more players. Their defence is not quite where they want it to be in particular. And I do think going into the start of the season, we may see Chelsea start a little bit slowly. Now, this Everton away game is not a bad game whatsoever, but I do think that there is potential for Chelsea to concede in this first game, just because I don't think they're quite ready for the new season. And that second game week against Spurs, you really do feel like Chelsea will concede a goal or two against Spurs as well. So for those Chelsea players, particularly these Chelsea defenders, I wonder if it's actually worth just waiting a little bit before going in on them. From game week 3, for example, might be a really nice idea to go on Chelsea defenders from there. Specifically with Reece James, I do worry that he is going to play in the right centre-back position. There has been a lot of talks that in the beginning of the season, certainly before Chelsea have brought in new players and kind of got those new players integrated into the team, James might be playing in a right centre-back position. And if he does, then again, that is going to spell less points for Reece James, and you'll pretty much be much more dependent on clean sheets rather than attacking returns, which is again not something that we really want if we're spending 6 million on a player. So if I were you guys, what I would personally do is make sure you have a player at 6 million in defence, or a player around 6 million with maybe a little bit of money in the bank, and then just have an idea of maybe getting in Reece James or Ben Chilwell or whoever else after a couple of game weeks. He's not a player I'd like to start the season with, so therefore if he's in your team right now, I would consider selling him. Another player who is in everyone's FPL teams right now is Sam Greenwood, the 4.5 million forward, and I know a lot of you guys are thinking, well, we're not really looking for too many points for Greenwood, we just want him to be on our benches just so we can save a bit of money on our bench, and that is the right thing to do. Definitely agree with that. Now, what I don't agree with is going for Greenwood as your 4.5 million forward, because his very, very high ownership means that he is at a very large risk of dropping down in price. The problem is with these 4.5 million forwards is that, or the 4.5 million, 4 million players in general, is if a lot of people own these players and they decide, okay, I actually want another forward, I want another big forward in my team, I'm going to have to sacrifice, say, a midfielder and my 4.5 million like bench striker. If they do that, that means that your 4.5 million bench striker is going to get a lot of sales. And if a lot of people are selling a player, that means that they're going to drop down in price. So generally speaking, the very high ownership 4.5 million and 4 million players, they have got this extreme risk of dropping down in price. And when you get to your first wild card, you really want your team value to be as much as possible, as high as possible. So these players who are likely to drop down in price to 4.4, maybe even 4.3 million, you just kind of don't want them there. Now, I'm assuming for most of you guys, if you do have Greenwood, he is the third player on your bench, a player that you're hoping you're never going to have to get that deep into your bench, that you actually have to play him. And if so, does it really matter if you're going for the, best, most points potential for a 4.5? At the end of the day, we're really looking at a maximum of 1 point from Greenwood. A third on your bench, you're never going to get that deep into your bench, fingers crossed, if your team's set up nicely. So in that case, is it worth having him? Just go for a low ownership 4.5 million forward, and then you don't have to worry about him dropping it in price. On to some keeps. We'll start you off with Salah. Obviously, a very, very obvious player, don't get me wrong. But I have seen more and more talk recently about people potentially selling Salah from their Game Week 1 teams in favour of getting some other different players. And I just want to say, I think that is absolutely crazy stuff. Salah is probably going to be by far the most popular captain in Game Week 1 away against Fulham. And he's got that nice Bournemouth game in Game Week 4 as well. So these are two games that you're probably going to want to captain Salah for. And if you don't have him in your team, you're really going to struggle. We saw last season that a lot of people started without Salah and they ended up finding themselves so far behind the pack, so far behind all of their rivals. It was just so difficult to even catch up with their mini league rivals or catch up on their rank, because Salah had done so much damage just by virtue of him not being owned. So he is a really, really crucial player to have. He is obviously the most well-owned premium player. Last season, in the first half of the season, he did amazingly. Second half of the season, he wasn't in quite the right form, but he was still getting an insane amount of chances to score goals and get assists. Over pre-season and in the Community Shield, he has looked much sharper, much back on it, and much more like his former self. So I think if he's continuing to get the amount of chances that he does get, he's going to make a mockery of this second half of last season, and we're going to see Salah again as we saw the first half of last season. I think he's going to get an insane amount of points, insane amount of goals, obviously on penalties as well. Obviously good for assists these days as well. So much to love about Salah. I would not even think about removing him from your teams. I would really strongly advise to keep him. Now, Gabriel Jesus is another player I think you should keep. Super high ownership player. So many people own this player. In fact, so much that I believe we are actually on a record for the highest owned player in FPL history. Never have we seen before a player with this high ownership. Certainly for a Game Week 1, this is by far the most owned a player has been going into Game Week 1. We're well over 70% by now. And I do believe, and I will have to confirm this, but I believe that this is the highest owned a player has ever been in FPL history. Now you kind of have to think, why is that? Why is he so highly owned? Well, it's because he's great value for money. He's looking really good at Arsenal in pre-season, and everything seems to be built around Jesus in this Arsenal team. So I think not just are we talking about, it's not just risky to go against the crowd on this one, and it is extremely risky to go against the crowd on this one. If Jesus does well in the first couple of game weeks and you don't have him, you are going to be so mudded because everyone else around you will have him in their FPL teams. But it's not only that, he's just a good FPL asset. For 8 million as a forward, like, that is just such good value, and I don't think people really kind of knew how he would fit in at Arsenal, but now we've kind of seen that in pre-season tactically and how that's going to work coming into this new season. These fixtures, a top quality striker with a lot to prove, and you know, a great team built around him. Really, it's gonna be a really interesting one for Jesus, and I think he's going to absolutely fly out of the starting line. So yeah, definitely a keep for me. And finally, some avoids. This is where you guys really disagree with me, but I am going to put this one in first. Bruno Guimaraes, I do think he is a firm avoid, and let me try and tell you why. It's definitely not because I think he's a bad player, because I think he's a fantastic footballer, and he did very well in spells in the second half of last season, particularly coming to the end of the season. But if we look at these fixtures, we've got Nottingham Forest at home, which is a good fixture for an attacker, a good fixture to get you goals, to get your assists. After that, the fixtures don't look so good. So obviously there's Man City there, which we all know is a very bad fixture. If you're an attacker playing against Man City, you're probably not going to get much joy. But we've also got this Brighton away and Wolves away game either side of that, and both of those teams are teams that typically don't concede many goals. So again, you are going to have these situations where attacking returns are going to be a little bit limited for your Newcastle attackers after Game Week 1. Now you can say to me, well, Game Week 1, Nottingham Forest, it might be worth going in just for one game week at least. It's a really good fixture. The problem is here is we've actually seen an injury to John Joe Shelvey. I believe he's got a hamstring injury, which is actually going to rule him out for at least a couple of weeks. And in those couple of weeks, we have these very nice fixtures that will probably cover the Nottingham Forest, Brighton game, may even go as far as the Man City game and the Wolves game, depending on the extent of the injury. But during this time where Shelvey is injured, it's going to mean that, unfortunately, Bruno Guimaraes is going to have to drop in deep and play in that deeper defensive midfield role to cover whilst Shelvey is out, because there's not really anyone else that can play quite as effectively as Bruno in that position. So Bruno is going to play in that deep position just for the first few weeks. After that, maybe when Newcastle's fixtures look a bit better, and when Bruno is back to playing in that 8 role, box-to-box midfielder, whatever you want to call it, that slightly more advanced role, at that point, that would be the time to go in on him. But right now, he's looking like a real trap, and I know a lot of you guys are thinking about bringing him in. I really would just be very hesitant about this one. Just be very careful about this one, because I can't see him starting the season too well. After that, one to revisit for sure. And finally, I'm going to put Cucurella in here just because he has been so hyped up today in particular. Obviously, and yesterday maybe as well. We've seen a lot of transfer rumours. Is he going to go to Man City? Is he going to go to Chelsea? Is he going to stay at Brighton? He's 5 million as a defender. And if he was to move to Chelsea or Man City, looking more likely to be Chelsea at this moment, then that's obviously a very good pick. But the problem is that if he does get a transfer move, it means he's probably going to take a couple of weeks before they fully integrate him into the first team. I wouldn't expect him to start and play, 90 minutes every game immediately. And you know what I said about Chelsea's defence anyway. I'm kind of a little bit concerned at the start of the season, but I do think it will get better after a few games. But also, if Cucurella doesn't get his move immediately, he doesn't move to Chelsea, he doesn't move to Man City, he doesn't move, and he stays at Brighton, if there is this ongoing transfer kind of drama, I suppose, Cucurella obviously has handed in a transfer request. Is he going to be played in these first games, even if he plays for Brighton? Well, you'd say, Possibly not. Possibly not, because if his head is not fully there, maybe Brighton, they do have other players that can play in these positions, you know, left wing back or left centre back, I suppose, in a back three. They probably are going to look elsewhere, possibly. So you've got a situation where the best case scenario really is either he's not really playing any games for Brighton because he's about to move, or he moves clubs and he's being slowly integrated into his new team and not getting all the minutes. So again, very much a player to keep an eye on, but to start the season on him, I don't know about that one, guys. So I'd be very, very hesitant to go for a Cucurella, but obviously I'd be very interested to hear some of your guys' thoughts on these ones. So just in summary, guys, basically there are a few players that I just think are just highly owned for a reason. Other players, however, there are a lot of players that are quite risky to go for at the start of the season. And I know a lot of people like to look at points from last season and things like that, but I really do think we need to kind of have a look a little bit at the human element. Is there a transfer situation going around? Is there some unsettledness at the club? How has the pre-season been? How do you expect this club or a team's club or, you know, a particular player to start this season? Not based on what they've done previously, but also the mental aspect as well. I think you have to take both of those into consideration when making FPL teams, particularly in game week 1, where it's probably better to go a little bit safer and then try and adapt to the new information that comes in as each week goes by. So that's basically my spiel for today. Those are the players that I think you should buy, sell, keep, avoid. And I'd be very, very interested to hear who you would put into each of these categories. Do you disagree with any of my picks? Do you agree with any of my picks? Are there any players that should go into one of these categories that I haven't thought of? Do let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy what you saw today, please do leave a like. It is massively appreciated. And do subscribe if you're new around here as well. Loads more content to come. I'm sure a few of you guys will remember the 100 expert videos we were doing last season. I can tell you that there will be a return of the 100 experts videos tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Again, we're going to try and do at least 2 bits of content a day over on this YouTube channel, whether that be videos or streams. So keep an eye on it. Get those notification bells on so you don't miss a thing. And yeah, let's get excited for the build up to the new season. We're almost there, guys. Let's keep tinkering. Let's see what we can do. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.